I think there was a lot of challenges with PSTN. Even the install, having the monitoring, and the installer would then have to communicate that to the customer. The customer had to reach out to BT OpenReach, somebody. Then they had to get that installed. Big headache.
The service of monitoring versus the automation of technology.
It's very interesting you said that, because a couple of days ago we were filming one with, don't know if you know, it's called Jason from Device Smart. They do the flashing blue light. It's called a Night Saber. He said, why don't we get AI to now, with the camera, to see that you're wearing a black t-shirt, black trousers, so the audible alert that comes out and goes, oi, you there with the black t-shirt and the black trousers, move away from it. Has there been much of a change with when we moved from telecoms, from like your ISDN line to PSTN, and we moved up to now, IP and stuff? Made it a lot easier? Or is it just the natural progression?
So the reality is, okay, you've got your filters that are going on now, which have removed a lot of the environmental false activations. I don't know exactly your stats from all the arcs that we're dealing with, and if you look at the actual efficiency, it's about 96% inefficient.
It drives upgrades, it drives maintenance packages, they could resell the monitoring with some passion, as opposed to just monitoring's a ticker box at the bottom of my costing sheet. No, the monitoring's proactive. How do you prove it's proactive?
Welcome to Room Secured. Remote monitoring is one of the least visible parts of the industry, but also one of the most critical, where alerts are assessed, incidents are verified, and decisions have real impact. To break this down, I'm joined by three people who know the reality of running modern monitoring operations. Dan Murphy from Fenix Monitoring, Ant Hebblethwaite from DSOC, Emmet Hogan, formerly of Reshaw and now at Inniovate. We're going to explore how ARCs are changing, the pressures they're dealing with, the misconceptions the industry still has, and the role technology, automation, and AI are now playing in day-to-day monitoring. We'll also look at police response, URNs, visual verification, guarding dispatch, rapid deployment units, and what the future of monitoring actually looks like from inside the control room. This is going to be an honest, open look at the challenges and realities shaping the monitoring sector today. Okay, let's just dive straight into it. Question I want to open up the podcast and the topics with is, across the industry, everyone seems to have a different idea of what a monitoring station actually does. What's the kind of misconceptions that you think the industry have with ARCs themselves?
I think it's kind of, there's two ways of answering that. I think you've got end users and kind of the business owners and the way they perceive it. And I think that's the easiest one to answer, because I think their biggest misconception would be that you're just staring at cameras, be that you've just got feeds of cameras coming in. Your people sat in the control room are watching it all the time, or you're running some kind of AI over it and it's at it all time, all day long, which is the easiest misconception to break down, because installers, generally speaking, understand it to be far more complex than that. There's far more moving pieces, there's more events coming into an arc, there's more. Whereas I think the second half of answering that would be installers' kind of misperceptions of it, maybe, of how involved, how expert it is, and also the way that the arc has to manage that, and the fact that you're getting a lot of false alarms, you're getting a lot of issues that you've got to put into false alarm management routines, there's a lot of isolations.
It's not just people think it's a video stream coming into a PC and it comes on the wall.
Exactly.
That's what people think it actually is.
A huge wall full of screens and cameras for every single site that we monitor. Absolutely, that's probably the biggest and we've all had those conversations. I think, correcting people that,
And probably, like, it's interesting when you talk about false activation management, that's, if you look at it from an ARC perspective, that's probably the biggest thing you have to deal with on a constant basis, both with end users and with installers, to explain why it's important, to explain what it looks like from the customer's point of view, be that the installer or the end user, and then what it means for everybody else's side. So if you don't do false activation management, you've just got a massive queue and everybody's site's affected by it. But you don't want your site affected by the suspension process. And that definitely is a sort of a balancing act when you're dealing with on the installer side, because they don't want any of their sites to be suspended, but at the same time, they don't want to be in a big queue.
No, and it's,
You
I
know?
think, and I think that's where ARCs, and we were speaking before, me and Dan, of you've got that responsibility when you've got the knowledge there. Because obviously Dan coming from handling the alarms and me coming from installing systems, you've got to get that across to them. You've got to get across to the installer market and the end user market. So the way we do that at DSOC is we'd have visitors to the place. And one of the biggest things you just mentioned, queue, the alarm queue. I don't know which one of you said it. You want them to understand the alarm queue. Look at the queue, the fact that it's inbound events, it's event driven. And if we're busy there in that queue, the rest of the job's more difficult. If we can manage that queue, so it's all the inbound. I think probably to answer it, try to give it an
Is it
all
like,
round answer.
let's say a telephone operator answering the phones, there's calls coming in, they can see all the switchboards lit up, but they can only do one at a time and they have to go. Does any take, like, I've not either worked in or seen ARC, does any come in and that could take a priority and say, right, this one, we need to answer that one first before these in there?
Well, you have to be careful, generally speaking, with that. But your life safety alarms, so your fire and life safety alarms and panics, well, you can do your queue priorities in that sense.
Okay.
But when it comes to your video alarms and your single intruder activations and your confirms, they're all there. They're all in the same queue. So it's so important to understand how an ARC manages that. And it's part of how we sell our businesses. We're good at managing that. We're good at explaining that to end users and installers, and we're good at managing it. Now, I think in not trying to go too much off the question really, but I think in a misconception would be that everything that you're receiving is a true thing that you want the ARC to deal with.
And this comes
It's
down
just
to where you
so
say
not
the
the
false
case.
activation management. That lines
absolutely.
into that,
when,
exactly.
When it comes through, you want to know that activation is something that you need to be dealing with. Your operators need to be, tackling that activation. And like you say, absolutely for the priority list, you've got your life-threatening alarms. But ultimately, when we're presented with an alarm, you would like to think that that's come through because you need to action it. You need to.
But the reality behind that is completely different. So the reality is, okay, you've got your filters that are going on now, which have removed a lot of the environmental false activations. Mm-hmm. But if you look at, and I don't know exactly your stats, but from all the ARCs that we're dealing with and our my previous experience with Reshaw, if you look at the actual efficiency, it's about 96% inefficient. And what that means is if you look at each activation where there's somebody on site, 95% of the time, that's actually somebody who's supposed to be on site, but just hasn't disarmed the system or hasn't stuck to schedule, hasn't rung in and said, hasn't stuck to the process. And that's a real problem because the environmental issue is important, right? So the likes of your lights and reflections with analytics or, out of boundary.
Foliage, plastic.
Yeah, all of that. That's important. But actually, the filtering system takes care of it. But even if it doesn't, the operator, as you know, right? You see it and you can bang it down really quickly because you go,
absolutely.
That is a leaf, right? That's a branch, that's a thing. Whereas you get somebody arriving on site, how do you know that person is allowed on site or not? So straight away, the operator has to ring, make the phone. Like that's a 5-minute.
So you're wasting time dealing with that call, and you've still got all these coming through as well.
Exactly that. That's what I mean. That's what you want them to see. You want everybody to see what's involved in that. Yeah. And I'd personally, I mean, you might be another question, so I don't want to get on my arse already, but I just think it's one of the most underrepresented bits of our whole industry by a mile.
But how do you then manage those false activations so it doesn't even come as a false activation through to your switchboard to begin with?
I mean, that's what you want in the first place. What you want in the first place is you shouldn't be getting it. Like if it's an intruder single activation repeatedly on the same site, you need to send that out to the installer. You need to be discussing with that with the installer to get the fault fixed. If it's video and it's overactive on environment or it's been too reliant on the AI, again, you need to pick it up and have the conversation with the installer. But again, it's time, but just somewhere else. So the ARC passes it over to the way that they manage that.
And
so
you don't know how long it'll be until that gets rectified.
Who's
but in the
actually rectifying
meantime,
it?
you're still getting those false
So
things
it falls
coming
into
through.
false line management. So it's getting either isolated, put out of service, because that's the only way you can cope with that queue. If that is a proven false alarm that you know is, and you keep receiving it, you can absolutely, within all the guidances, put that into your false alarm management. Sounds a bit scaremongery, and that's, I think, why a lot of people don't talk about it. And that
Can you switch off that? Like, I'll go to one thing, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you get false activation, police comes, is it twice, or the 3 times, they put you on a lower response, don't they?
Yeah, so
in
usually
effect.
3 strikes.
3 strikes and
sort of
a low thing.
Yeah.
Can
and then
you do that with, if you're getting continued false alarms? Can you like either switch it off or just drop it because that site's full of false alarms? We're putting that down to the market.
Usually,
or is
you
there
would
some
like
liability?
you would like to reach out to the installer and say, look, these are the challenges, or this is the problem we're having with this site. Can we look to do something like you say, potentially isolate the signal that's causing the problem, or something like that? So yeah, we would work with the installer and even the end customer and say, this is the problem. It's obviously not going to be rectified overnight. No. So can we put this something here in the meantime? But yeah, we would obviously need to relay that to the customer.
It's
or
a very
to the
careful balancing
installer.
act, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's a careful balancing, and I think that's one of the reasons it's not spoke about a lot.
Yeah,
because it's just a bit icky. It's a signal's getting part of a camera, a site, a signal out of service, isolated, and it just sounds awful.
And
but
it's not a conversation as well that an installer necessarily wants to have with their customer, that the ARC is
reporting
having an issue with this.
And I think
and it ultimately relies on it, then falls on the installer, does it? Because they're the ones that have got to go and rectify it.
Yeah, and it's not about installer bashing. It's just wanting them to be interested.
But nobody actually wants, in a certain degree, nobody wants to actually have the conversation in the sense of exactly as Anthony's saying. Like from a monitoring perspective, you're sitting there going, so the salesperson or whoever sold that site has talked to the installer. They have a relationship there. They've agreed either that this is the schedule and this is what's going to happen and da-da-da-da-da. They've agreed the price. That's fine, right? That installer's now gone and talked to the customer and said this is exactly what's going to happen. And then all of a sudden,
it's not.
Operations come in and go, hang on, this isn't what's happening. The customer isn't behaving the way it is. But the sales guy doesn't want to get on to his customer and say, hang on, we've got a problem here. The operator needs to get it sorted. But, customer's a customer. So it's one of those ones where as you go down the chain, no one wants to talk about it.
Yeah,
but actually it's probably the biggest issue from actually getting good response and good interaction on any site.
I find it a shame that people don't want to talk about it because it's there. It's in front of everyone's face. It's like anything. It's like a new bit of kit comes out and it's got a fault with it. We'll speak about it. We come across an end user who's a nightmare customer, and all suddenly gossip circles and everybody knows. The ARC side of it, there's some installer estates and some that are known amongst the ARCs that are difficult to deal with and cope with. And then no one's coming. You can't name them. You're not going to start bringing names into it. It's not about that. But bring the problem to it. Talk about the problem. Keep talking about the problem. Because the right installer, we've got plenty of them. The right installer want actually to know, because if they're clever enough, it drives upgrades. It drives maintenance packages. They could resell the monitoring with some passion, as opposed to just monitoring's a ticker box at the bottom of my costing sheet. No, the monitoring's proactive. How do you prove it's proactive? Well, because they're constantly in contact with us. They're constantly wanting a meeting. They're constantly wanting to explain the monitoring should be better. Can we make it better?
That's right. No. I think the other challenge as well is like you say, the installer that gets the information from us to say this is not working, or this signal's causing problems, etc. It's a difficult conversation to have with the customer as well, because at the end of the day, if the installer needs to return to site, who's going to pay for that?
Who's going to pay for that? Is it part of the maintenance, or is it
exactly? And it's not necessarily an issue with the installer or anything like that. It could be a number of things. It could be faulty equipment. It could be the customer actually having problems with it, or done something.
I don't know what you find, but
you just don't know.
I mean, and I don't want to speak on your guys' behalf, but on our side, a lot of it's just actually how it's set up. Especially on CCTV.
Is that like the commissioning side?
Public areas being like your detection zones, picking up public areas, feeding it back to the installer, but then we've not got the authority or right to make such a detection area change, so we'd have to use the filtering. But then everything goes on the AI filtering. You look at your AI filtering stats and you're like, everything's getting put there. Whereas if education, and we did this and it was spoke about more often, I think the installers would be like, oh, that's all that's needed. But just need to change this.
It's also though when you go into it, like it's interesting is if you every ARC, right? If you go and you talk to every ARC, 5 to 8 in the morning, so between 5 and 8 in the morning and between 5 and 8 in the evening, your alarm queue goes huge, because people start coming in on site and they're walking in and they're going, the schedule is at 6 o'clock. It's 5 to 6. you're getting up, you're bleary-eyed, you're not making that phone call. People aren't paying attention to it. And that's what really drives, and then going back to it, that's what drives the risk profile, right? Because you sit there and you go, okay, if that's happening all the time, it's boy who cried wolf. Because no matter how hard you train any operator across any arc, so this is not to like, it doesn't matter. We have evolution that has said, if it happens 100 times, it's going to happen 101 times. So effectively, you're going to every operator going, don't worry about what humankind has created for years and years. You've got to treat it absolutely 100% the same. And that's unbelievably hard to do. And you go, okay, well, 100 times, somebody comes on a high vis in there at around about 7 o'clock, and the schedule is slightly off, and they're going, 101 times somebody comes in, it's the ARC's problem, right? It is, and it is the ARC's problem. But no one actually understand, or sorry, not no one. It's rarely put forward that actually this is the problem, and like the environment is an issue, but it's more solvable, right? Because even if it is an operator, like you can close it down quickly. Whilst the person on site, that you've got to do one of two things. If the queue is too big, you've got to make an assumption, which is incredibly dangerous. Or you've got to turn around and go, I'm going to accept the fact that I'm going to be slow to response, but I'm going to respond to each one.
See, for me, it's like I absolutely spot on. That is exactly what goes on, and we all see it. They're the bits that I like to pick up. I want to pick up what's the problems. We were speaking about progress into account management. When I did that and went into a commercial role, I preferred to go, right, existing customer base, what are the problems? Because that's my easy pickups. They're my things to solve. And ARC's having that mentality.
Do you think that's with you coming from on the tools engineering background?
Yeah,
that you can see we got issues on this site, so someone's not set that up correctly.
Yep. So therefore, and I think every end user is interested if you're talking to them about a solution. Yeah. It might not be cost, because what I used to like to try to do, and I used to win a lot of accounts doing it, most of what we'd get done would be on the PPM visits. They'd be on the maintenance visits. But I'd just be clever with when I scheduled it. So it'd be, I've talked to said end user who's got 40, 50 sites. This is when I was on the tools. And it'd be, I've looked across your estate on your alarm signals. I've looked across your reports from the monitoring station. I've looked across your second fix reports. And we can improve your first fix reports, and here's your list of faults. And they go, cost. And I go, no, there ain't one. It'll all get done over the next 12 months. Yeah. And they're like, win, 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 win. So when I talk to installers now, I use that model and go, it isn't actually selling. It's just using, your guys are already going to be on that job. Let's be honest, how much longer is it going to take them? We're talking about changing some MVR settings. We're talking about getting a relay from a something to something else. It's nothing really. Or if it is a sell, I think it's coming from the right angle, because you're suddenly getting in that end user's mind. Monitoring's actually proactive. They're actually picking up on this and they're feeding it back to me. But I think to try to answer the question is, I think the biggest misperception is that I think most installers think it's simpler than it truly is. I think there are a lot of measures to keep an ARC running.
But it's interesting that what you're talking about as well, and I think this is part of the industry as a whole is not linked up, and actually there's not a huge amount of experience from sort of dealing with end user to dealing with installation to dealing with monitoring to dealing with manufacturer, because if you look, like, key products on the market that are used for monitoring don't actually have a dedicated arm and disarm function, right? So like you use input one, right? That will do the disarm, but it's not actually a dedicated arm and disarm. And so I'm biased, right? Because this is what we do.
Yeah, I'm saying, yeah.
This is what
I know what you mean, though. Your point is push it all through the chain.
Well, yeah, but also it's kind of interesting because the manufacturer doesn't. Sorry, not all manufacturers, but a lot of manufacturers don't pay attention to arm and disarm.
Or the integration within the arm and disarm.
Well, what that looks like and what that means to the end user.
Yeah,
what that means.
Do you think that comes from the psyche of the schedule sat with the ARC?
Well, yeah, it comes from, I think so. And
they'd never do, you said it earlier, they'd never do that with an intruder alarm panel.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you look at that kind of, it sits with the ARC, part of that comes from, well, it's got nothing to do with me, Chief. But the other part is, because there hasn't been a solution, right? So up until recently enough, you go, well, how are you going to arm and disarm?
I think I know where you're going with this.
Well, yeah. don't get me wrong. There's a clear bias.
We're going to slide something in.
No, but outside of us,
you're right, mate.
No, but outside of us, if you look at it, so I will, like, if you look at Devantis as a thing, which is a high end product, right? And it is a high end product. But they have spent time looking at how they arm and disarm. Yeah. They've got 4 to 8 zones, so there's a lot of flexibility. And like a lot of that comes from how do we put in the solution that's going to be a solution that works for the end user. So like you look at residential, you know, you've got a front and a back, you've got tripwires, or you've got full like there's a whole load of areas there where I want to have 3 or 4 rules here because I want to have a perimeter protection during the day when my kids are out playing football in the garden. I want to be able to arm the front when we're having a barbecue at the back. You know, so
part sets.
there's a huge amount in there, and they've thought about that and understood it, and it's kind of like that's residential. It is an area in unto itself. So it's interesting when you're talking about in the queue, can you go up and down? Like residential, if you look at it in reality, anybody breaking into residential, what they're trying to do is get into that house as fast as possible. Whilst if they go to a commercial site, generally they're going to look around the outside and then go in. So there's a real variant there as well. So you've got to really understand it. But, you know, Devantis have put in time to understand what that looks like from a customer's point of view, what it looks like from an ARC point of view.
Yeah, and we see that. Yeah, we see that because we've niched. I mean, it's probably going to pop up on some other stuff that you ask us, I'm sure. But when you arrive in niche sectors, not even niche, but we've done that. And you see that there are solutions when the solutions in them sectors are live and breathe it.
Yeah.
Well, then it's manageable. Because I get asked that all the time because we do so much with self-storage. So how could you cope with all of that? And it's off the back of what's in that space.
Yeah.
Us getting to grips with it.
You were mentioning like the integration with everything. You tend to see, let's say, your video surveillance manufacturers, they're always pushing their products. You've got the Intruder manufacturers pushing theirs. There doesn't seem to be, like, does remote monitoring get like an afterthought, or how do you push what you guys do out to the industry? Apart from like you have your standard events, exhibitions that you attend, how do you get that point across? Like, look, we're part of the industry as well. You need to add monitoring.
I think just getting out and speaking to installers and talking about the value of, you know, adding an ARC, especially if they're not, you know, currently
With one already.
Yeah,
we should
with
champion
one, you
it
know.
as
And
well.
is
shouldn't we?
it
Yeah, I think
is it selling the benefits to the installer, who then can go and sell the
Yeah.
benefits
Yeah,
on to
agree.
the end
That's how
user?
you fix it.
Because you don't
No.
speak to the end
Yeah.
user at all.
That's
do
how you fix it.
100%.
You fix it. You exactly like that. You just we need to be a voice more often with more passion in the industry. So installers are
it's
hearing
understanding as well.
you're doing
You know,
that balancing.
there's the installers out there that don't, you know, use monitoring at all, and there's plenty out there that just you know you'll speak to and the monitoring. No, it's not for me.
Why do
But
they not?
I think it's a few things probably. You know, time, I suppose, is an element of time that you're going to need to spend on site a little bit more. Obviously, cost. So, you know, additional cost to the customer. And obviously,
Are they scared to add that onto them?
Exactly. Yeah. It's a competitive market, isn't it? And you're trying to win that business. And then if you say, here's a package with monitoring, it's going to be a little bit more. And you'll find that, you know, you can try and draw that back a little bit. And if they don't need it necessarily driven by insurance, then, you know, that's usually. But also, you know, I think if we look back years ago, you know, connecting a signaling device, you know, to an ARC was a lot more difficult than it is now.
I think I should mention to the viewers is that you've come from the background of working as an actual operator.
Yes.
And you've had the background actually being on the tools.
Yeah.
So you installing the product.
Yep.
Dan was viewing the information, and Emmet, you guys were running the whole operation.
Yeah, it works. Yeah.
Do you think, like you were just saying then, go back 10, 15 years or so ago, you had to add an extra device onto this, let's say, video surveillance system. You'd add on a transmission device, say like a AdPro, Hightel, SmartTel, etc. And was it that the installers weren't confident with doing?
Yeah, it is that. But yeah, again, I think a lot of it is time. You know, installers are on such a tight schedule. You know, the amount of jobs that an engineer's got to go to, you'll know, and I think that's the biggest. If you can reduce that down, and you know, you've not got to worry about that element of connecting it to an ARC and all the, you know,
you can just go in, do the install. There you go, off to the next job.
And I think guys who were earlier adopters, a lot of them got burnt as well, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people who, you know, either it was the wrong equipment or maybe the monitoring station wasn't so au fait with doing, say, CCTV monitoring versus Intruder. And they're two very different disciplines. So there's definitely there'd be guys who I've talked to and very big installers with very big books who go, I don't want to touch CCTV monitoring because of liability or because they've had problems before. And, you know, if you're doing CCTV monitoring, intruder monitoring is a lot more straightforward, right? Like it's the signal comes in, it's much more, CCTV is more nuanced. And it's the installer's brand, right? It's the installer's reputation that you are actually holding at that moment in time, right? So your response affects how the installer is perceived. And so there's a good number of integrators and installers who kind of went, hang on, this isn't to the level that I'm comfortable at. And therefore, I don't want to risk my reputation. And I've got a really nice book of Intruder, and I've got a really nice book of X, Y, and Z. And that's what I want to keep. And I don't want to damage my reputation with my one customer over, you know, a couple of grand recurring revenue when I've got an estate of 100
I also
sites.
think there's some like core, just human things to do with it. I think video's so ambiguous. So the debate, you're welcoming the debate by monitoring video. You're going to, even if you're using AI filtering, you're doing your job really well. The end user, the installer, could look through the recorded footage and they could believe that that's a suspicious incident, whereas our operator, who does that every day,
Knows that it's not.
knows that it's not for other reasons. It could be that they know that site because they're receiving events from that site every single night. It could be they know that tenant always accesses that site at 9:15. That client's going, he's wearing all black and he's got his hood up and he's got a snood. And our guy's going, well, it's November, it's freezing, and he always goes in that door. And that's not your door. So that's got nothing to do with you. But I think it's got two things in my career as on the tools and then into account management. You either grip it and get passionate about it and want to sell it and want to do it, or you don't. And I think if you're scared of having the difficult conversations because it is ambiguous, then you won't sell it. Whereas if you're not scared of having them, you'll sell it.
I think like what you mentioned as well, though, about like the trust element, and you know, at Fenix, we very much see it as a partnership, and you know, maybe historically that's not necessarily always been the case, and you know, you the installer, you know, ultimately has to trust the ARC. And it goes both ways. So we're really big on that, and I think that's, you know,
also training.
Really important.
Don't you know, training as well, though? You know, because I think like intruders, and you do your apprenticeship, which like nearly you'd hope most are doing, especially on fire and intruder. And then on CCTV, I did so many courses, and none of it included monitoring.
None
of it.
Absolutely.
And you can see, like, it's interesting is you can see that as well, right? Like if you look at, say, how cameras are set up on a site. Frequently they're set up which will give you a coverage but won't give you the coverage that you would prefer to have from a monitoring perspective. And that's quite, like, you can see that all the time. And it's the same, like, if you look at some of the hardware that's chosen, you know, the typical thing, how'd you get there? Well, you don't start from here. You know, like it's very much, you're kind of going, yeah, okay, we can do that, but understand you now have two blind spots here because you put two cameras at either end of a building looking this way. So underneath them.
I think you're right, because I think there is a bit of training comes from the manufacturers, because I've done bits with like Axis and Avigilon and stuff, but it's on how to raise the detection or on how to set the analytic triggers. It's not what happens the other side. There's no real installer training for an installer to understand an ARC. And I think that'd be fantastic.
I think, Dan, you mentioned there's, with the installer training, am I right in thinking that you guys are partnered up with Skills for Security?
Yes.
So you actually provide this training, so it's setting them as they're doing their apprenticeship?
Yes.
And do you think there's more needs to be done within the industry with, you know, like you say, training, etc.?
Yeah. And that's very much where our partnership, you know, has come from, because the understanding, like you say, at an apprentice stage, and you know, this apprentice, you know, in 10 years, 15 years time, might have his own, you know, business.
He'll know that we need to
he'll see
get
the value in it, and obviously he's done it from day dot. And I think that maybe that's
one thing I just want to pick up that we've had in this discussion is, do installers actually see the benefits of the recurring revenue, or do you have to actually go out and explain to them? I say, look,
mine do. That's my main sell.
Well, they understand it, I think, for the most part, but I suppose that's one for the installers that are not necessarily using monitoring, or you know, partnered with an ARC, is that exists. There is that opportunity for that recurring revenue, and you know, and you're visiting these sites. You're already here. You're already, you know, have these relationships with these end clients. But yeah, for some reason they've just not got the monitoring, and for every site that you go to, you know, it certainly can add up.
I do think it's recurring. You said it, liability. It's recurring revenue versus liability. I think if you don't already offer CCTV monitoring, it's likely going to be that you've weighed it up and you don't want to.
Yeah,
for liability reasons, technical reasons, training reasons. So the recurring revenues are a good carrot to dangle, but some of them just not interested whatsoever. But yeah, I sell it like that.
But I think it's interesting as well, though. Yeah, guys do get the recurring revenue, but I think sometimes what's missed there's two parts that's missed. One is guys that choose not to go after it. What they're not seeing is somebody is going to go after that. So they're sitting there.
Opportunity.
Yeah, well, they're sitting there going, I got a nice profile here. I'm doing all the Intruder across this customer. I've got 20 sites. Happy days. I don't want to risk doing monitoring. And then you're going, yeah, but somebody else is going to come in and go, by the way, I do CCTV monitoring, and I'm going to eat your lunch on the Intruder, because they're just going to come in and they're going to go,
give that for free.
Yeah,
Include it.
We're bringing you new solutions. We're bringing you solutions that your other person should have brought you but hasn't, right? So you had a problem, I can solve it. Now, sure, look, of course I can do your Intruder. So there's that side to it, right, where they don't see it.
I think that does fall back to the education piece. I really do, because I think I've been through the whole chain with it, and I understand liability, and I understand what that looks like when it goes wrong, and also when it's literally goes through to some kind of claim. I get that. No, you can't be scared of that.
No,
it's part of our industry in every other way. Same with like fire life safety. If the worst of the worst happens, it goes to an uncomfortable place. But I think if you grow up on the tools, installing the kit, and you're taught all of it, like there's a real route on learning. So I've had to hunt around and find mine to do this course that has helped me understand this better, contracts, legals, finances. I've had to look for it. Whereas if there were a more clearer route to really understand how to run a security business, and ARCs were in that chain, you're not scared of it. Because the installers that we do it with, I've got to take them on that journey sometimes, because like they're so scared to do it, but then when they see the monetary value, they'll take the leap.
Well, it's funny. You're right, and I look at it. Everybody looks at it from their own perspective, right? Like as you're saying, you're going for the tools. I look at it on a commercial perspective, right? And I think one of the big misses as well is that CCTV is a lot more sticky than Intruder.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you do good CCTV monitoring, customer will not want to move away from you, because the risk, they've got such peace of mind that they're kind of going, I don't want to change. This is all working really well. And I think that's a big miss. Like, so from a commercial perspective, that's a big risk. And the other one that I think is in the industry in total, which is kind of missed every so often, is people understand the value of ARR to the point of view of that means that my profit is X per annum, right? But what they're not seeing, and look, we see it all the time, is what the actual value to your business is, right? So your ARR is important in that annual, right, I'm making this amount of profit. But if you're looking to sell your business, go outside your business, that ARR is multiplied.
100%.
And that's a real miss that people don't always take, right? They don't always see that they're going, okay, I'm increasing the value of my total business by this amount. And that really is a bit that I think that stickiness of the book of, particularly CCTV monitoring, because Intruder people will move around, but particularly CCTV monitoring, you're going, now you've got a sticky book that's got a real value to it. Now look at what the total value of your installation company is. And that, and it's the same like with the maintenance, the same with the others. But that stickiness of the CCTV, of the monitoring side of that, means that you're going to have the maintenance on the cameras. It means that you're able to get the Intruder. It means they're slow to move. And that makes a big difference.
Of course it does, yeah. You're looking at the business, not just the system.
Yeah. Just a quick reminder that today's episode is sponsored by Smokescreen. Smokescreen generators are incredibly powerful security fogging solutions that reduce theft, deter criminals, and protect property. In the event of a break-in, the system fills the room with safe, harmless smoke that debilitates and disorients the intruders and keeps your valuables secure.
You mentioned there that if a ARC is doing well with CCTV monitoring, you know, they're going to bring on a lot of business. I've also seen that when an ARC isn't doing well somewhere, or there's been an issue with a installer, that installer can turn around and say, you know what, I don't want this ARC anymore, and they want to take 50, 60, 100 sites over to another. You must have come across that.
Yep.
Where you've either taken business or you've lost business. It's
taken all the time, right? Never lost.
Inevitable. But
We're on camera.
what I just lost my train of thought then. What I was it was, yes. So how, because I see on Facebook forums, there's always installers, you guys are probably part of the same forum as well, installers are going on saying, oh, I'm fed up with this company, who do you recommend?
Yep.
How does a monitoring station, when you're faced with that issue, like you're going to lose potentially 100 sites, how do you like overcome that? Or is it like I'll give
I
you
wondered
one
which way you were going with that one, yeah.
I'll give you one example. There was one person I personally know who, I think he has 150 sites, and he wanted to move them away from this monitoring station because their telephone number, I think it started with an 08 or an 03, and the people who were attending sites, their mobile phone couldn't call that number.
Yeah.
You know, like because the non-geographical, let's say you're on a pay-as-you-go or something,
Yeah.
it thinks it's a chargeable 03. And the monitoring station said, we're not going to change our number. So they potentially just lost 150 sites for something that could have been rectified quite easily.
Think maybe that wasn't changeable. If they're going to, if an installer comes to us and it's for the reason they're looking to leave is for a reason of our service that is absolutely integral to our service, and we cannot change that because that's how we deliver our service at the level we deliver it to for all them sites, well then ultimately they're going to leave. Because if it's, you're not going to break the model of how you run a business well and how you deliver a service well for one installer stamping the feet over one bit of service. If it was you letting them down, you want to be all over it. You want to be, did we? How did we? Where did we? If it's rates, why is it rates? How's someone cheaper? If it's systems, how are they offering it?
Like I say, understanding where the the installer is coming from first of all, and seeing what can be done, if things can be changed. And in that case, it probably wasn't very easy to change the number, and it was probably easier in the grand scheme of things to lose
the client.
150 connections, which is
it kind of shows you
surprising.
As well, right? Like you know the industry well, and you're going like, that's an easy enough thing to do, right? Just change the number. But you look at it, you've got however many thousands of sites that you're monitoring. All of those customers have your number at the moment. You've got like signage out there which has got your number on it. You've got like it's not your it sounds really straightforward.
But I do think we'd have kept that because I know how to solve that.
Yeah, you can
add a virtual number onto the same line.
You
know,
like to think that, like you
convert
say, especially in that situation, you could find a solution.
Yeah, but that's the point. Your brain spins about how do I fix what the problem is. But sometimes there are some things that it's going to happen. It's happened to all ARCs. Some bit that their problem with you or your business is a process that you've got that's integral to how you run your business, and sometimes they're going to pick to leave. Also, sometimes I do believe it's just part of you can blame the ARC and move because something's gone wrong, and sometimes it's easy to say
blame the
it
ARC.
was that. I'm not saying that that's all the time, but it's another aspect of it. And another one, last one, is just sometimes they want to change. Sometimes they've been sold by another ARC that it's better for this reason, that reason, the other reason. Yeah. So then they turn back and look at their existing ARC.
Looks greener.
They look at the existing ARC and they'll come up with a reason to leave. Sometimes.
But that also comes down to like your education and like exactly what Ant is talking about, right? Is it's also in the ARC's interest to keep providing, innovative solutions, to keep providing support, to keep, because if you do that, you'll keep most of your customers. And some customers, for whatever reason, are going to move. But it's interesting because all three of us will be independent ARCs, right? So we don't have our own installation arm, or we never had our own installation arm. Don't have it now, obviously. But it's interesting, like the installer from a sales pitch point of view, they've got a really nice point of view because they can turn around and go, I have chosen this ARC because I have a choice of 25 and I've chosen this one because I believe it's the best because of this, and this, whatever the reasons are.
Yeah.
And then legitimately, or sometimes illegitimately, but legitimately.
Don't point
they-
at me when you say that.
Sorry, but sometimes illegitimately, but they can then turn around to the customer and go, yeah, that arc made a mistake. I am now going to move you to this arc, right? And it gives that level of kind of, from an installer's point of view, they have control over it.
I think that's it. It's you can look at it as a positive as well,
Yeah,
because
you can, yeah.
it pushes us all to be better and to be build relationships a lot better, and like you say, it's what we're all sort of.
Yeah, agreed.
But it does, like it's that's the whole point, right? Like, and it's not so it's not in a chain, right? So you're like you have to be good, because if you're not good, they'll move from here to here or from here to here, right? So you have to be good. Whilst the guys who have their own control room and they're doing their own installation, they're doing the whole thing. That's the interest there is actually you keep that chain correct the whole way through. And who's checking the work? Who's making sure that that's done properly? Who's making sure it's not getting suspended because it's been badly installed?
Yeah,
and I think that's the from an installer point of view. I think that's a big sell.
Yeah, I think as an independent ARC, you are relying on, like you say, you're not having to go and get the installs and ensure that they're end to end, etc. You can really focus on what you do, and that's monitoring.
I agree. I think that's why we'd have a similar take to what you just said.
Yeah,
the transfers being easily, we'd rather they were more easily done.
Yeah,
just not in terms of because it's easy to win business, just in terms of like we're not looking for the installer maintenance work.
No.
So the end user then is open to pick and choose their own the best service provider for installer maintenance.
Yep.
So I believe whoever then maintains that system should be well open to choose who's best to monitor that system.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be tied into anything other than the contractual terms.
Yep.
It shouldn't be any more difficult simply because someone's installed it in a clever way to such a point it almost appears proprietary. Because we come across some of them where there's a reluctance to transfer or there's an intention to transfer, but they can't understand how to get it done. Because whoever it is that's put it in has been that clever, whatever you want to call it, that
they've locked it down.
Locked it in, it's wrapped up, it's got a relay out of a certain access control, it signals in a certain
tricks,
way.
I suppose, historic, more
so you need to call them
there's
back
certain
to
ties that connect an installer
so you just end
with
up having to rip hardware out,
yeah.
and it becomes painful for everybody.
More cost.
And in reality, you never want so that's kind of where you come down into where we went back and said the ARC wants to be giving innovative solutions and doing that, because you want to be giving those solutions rather than locking somebody into a simple
Absolutely.
solution, right? And that's where it builds up. You're going, well, actually, I don't want to leave Fenix DSOC because this is what they do for me.
Yeah.
Right. This is what they do, and actually, ARC A can't do that or doesn't do that.
Yeah, you don't want them to
know,
say we're not leaving you just because we can't be asked.
Yeah,
exactly.
We can't be asked. It's a bit difficult, so we're just going to stay with you.
Like you say,
Like,
again,
really?
going back to the being independent, you can really, like you say, focus on that and
100%.
supporting the installer.
Technology-wise, and you probably understand this when you were out on the tools. I remember traditionally, when you're doing remote monitoring sites, you were actually installing, let's say, your red walls or actual detectors outdoors.
Yeah.
Okay. Which we all know reduces a hell of a lot of false alarms. We've now seeing less and less of them. I've spoke to the manufacturers as well. Then they say we're seeing a gradual decline in people installing actual detectors because the video surveillance manufacturers have said, look, we can do detection. We've got this line intrusion. We've got AI filtering now. We've got all this stuff, and you've got it in there. Why do you want to start installing that? Just do this. How is that affecting the alarms coming into?
Yeah, it's really interesting actually. It's a good. We were on about the back at DSOC a couple of weeks ago because one of our team leaders has become an account manager. Same journey that Dan's been on, and he was asking that because he's got no system knowledge. And he's like, why would they have PIRs? Why would they have beams? Why would they have microwaves? Why have they got analytics? And I just think it's a shame in a sense because it's taken the security industry educating the end user market from layers. It's taken that out of it now a little bit. It's taken it of they'll stick 4 cameras on the building and have it looking out. And sometimes it's, well, the camera sees all of that, so it'll detect all of that.
Yeah.
And then you're losing that point of field of view. You're losing that it's not in line with the area on which you want detection. So then you're finding what they're doing is then they're going, all right, I'll put the camera on the perimeter. And it's like it's fine, but then it's doing 25% of its job because it's only detecting on a channel. Do you know what would have done a good job there? A beam. Because that's what it's designed to do. Do you know what would have done a good job on that corner there? A 45, 90 degree PIR. A good one that's doing dual, not just single. And then you have a camera for live view confirmation. So it's helped everybody become a little bit lazy with it, in my opinion. The designs are easy now because it's,
Just
can I
take a
cover
camera,
100% of that site with cameras, yeah? Fail point, camera goes off, everything's gone. Detection and view. I just think, and I'm not saying I'm such an advocate of sensing and detecting that I'd say they shouldn't be doing the video analytics, but we started this chat off with false alarm management. And if I'm using inputs, like the old school way of doing it, let's call it now, which is daft really, you get like 16 zones on an ad pro, but you've got live view camera. So let's say you got an issue with the zones, individual PIRs or an area, you could isolate that, but keep the camera on.
Keep the camera on so you can still have
Whereas
some
now,
visual.
you turn it effectively, you're never going to receive anything with the camera again, so it may as well be off. So if you were to isolate that, let's say it's that same site's covered by 8 cameras on analytics, and you were to take one of them out, you lose all of it. 'Cause, well, why would you ever live view that camera ever again? Whereas on the old school way is, well, the PIRs, some of the cameras in that area are still on, so I'll still get the trigger and I compare it to the live view camera. So I think in a lot of ways it's made design a bit lazy, and I think it's sometimes made education to the end user market a little bit lazy, but they're amazing. So I can see why it's working. These cameras and what they can do, the amount of different things you can do.
Do you think we're ever going to go back to
Do you know what? Weirdly,
detector-ish?
I do a little bit.
Do you?
Yeah, I do, yeah. In certain sectors. Because you can see it on the CNI and CPNI sites, they've not really changed. You still need that. Obviously, if you're pushing 8418, then you still need that to a degree for your resilience.
Well, like if you look at 8418, nearly every 8418 that's coming on now will be analytics based, right?
I know.
So, so it's kind of interesting. If you look at CCTV monitoring as a whole, right, we happen to use CCTV because that's the infrastructure that's there. Because if you actually look at what CCTV monitoring does versus Intruder and everything else, effectively the key part is it's intervention, early intervention, that there's somebody on your site and you're intervening.
Before
they
do
damage.
broken into the building, isn't it?
So effectively your CCTV is going, and we're doing CCTV because that's it. Like for me, radar is one of the, I just love radar because I think it's cool.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, it's cool, but it doesn't really, like, in your mainstream at the moment. It's not something that's there. It's not something. Whereas if you look at, if somebody's got a CCTV system, you can get that monitored straight away now. You can turn that into a smart detecting system really quickly. So I think things will change, but at the moment, good analytics is very good. But yeah, you're right. How it's actually implemented and where it comes from, and I think that goes one back to what we've been talking about, which is the education and understanding that. And then the second part is and this probably comes back to the earliest question, is sort of what are the things that aren't known. It's the understanding of, if you look at the filtering systems that are out there, some of them are very good, and they go, well, right, well, I'm just going to put that on top of a detection system, which isn't as accurate as I'd like it to be, but overall, it's between the two of them that will work. And you go, well, that's a bit of a risk, because actually if the detection doesn't detect, the filtering system is never going to do it. And then also, you'll have people will turn around and go, well, I'm getting 60 meters of detection out of my system. But you put that on a filtering system, and most filtering systems have 30 meters, right? So all of a sudden, a genuine detection goes into filtering and then gets moved out, and the operator never sees
and
it.
I guess that's my. I don't know if I'm kind of getting it across right, but that's. I was talking to the guys over at BI3 about it. So interesting, you said Devantis earlier, because we were talking about. They're all about the object classification and creating a true detection out on site. So for us to be close to that is important, because the ARCs want that. So I'm never going to get away from a camera that looks at one scene and detects that whole scene, and that's what's going to present to one of our operators. That's perfect, that's great. But don't rely on the measures our side to achieve it. As long as you're specifying your kit for the right reasons, as long as you're actually surveying, as long as you're actually listening to your client, and as long as you're actually designing a system, no problem with analytics. They're amazing. If it's you're not really following the process. And what it is this very clever AI camera can just do it all. So I'll just put it on a wall and point it. That's going to cause us
They
problems.
should be
That's gonna
designing the
cause
system with remote monitoring in mind. At the end,
100%.
And
this
that's my
is
point. Yeah. So
the
rule sensors out. Go through the chain. That's what
Yeah,
you're meant to do
yeah.
when you're taught and trained to do your system designs and surveys. It's layers out to in. So you rule them out and arrive at analytics as the best solution. Don't just pitch it straight away because it's the easiest of sells. Try to secure that premise. And PIRs are part of that. Beams are part of that. Cameras are part of that.
Have you guys got any systems that utilising radar or LiDAR at the moment?
There's all sorts out there, isn't there? So when I installed, we used to put the Axis radar units in quite a lot, the 180 units. So we put a Axis 180 radar with an Axis
Camera.
panoramic or 180. I think they used 3 lenses to do it. But there's all sorts in there. There's all sorts out there. 360 Vision have got one built into the PTZ Pred. It is good stuff.
There's some really and they've got long detection. Like you can be up to 400 meter diameters and at a decent level, but it's expensive as well. And I think that's part of the unspoken part of our industry a little bit. And when you chatted earlier on, when you were saying why don't people do it, it's cost. And a lot of guys who are in the industry aren't necessarily salespeople. They're not necessarily looking, how do I do it? And actually, price is something that a lot of people are uncomfortable about talking about.
Yep.
And you look at it and you go, okay, well, what's the budget? How are we going to make that fit? And I think that's one of the issues as well, is because you talk about BI3, their kit is unbelievably good. They run 2 analytics. It's a really, there's 2 engines running behind it. It's really smart. It's really good. It ain't cheap, and that's the other side, is then you've got somebody else who doesn't necessarily fully understand the difference between it. And they go, well, that puts a little red box around that person when they're standing there. So does that.
Yeah.
It's effectively the same.
Either.
And you're kind of going, well, it's not. But actually, to explain that and to get into that depth, it really requires somebody to be willing to listen, spend time. And people are busy, right? People are going to the next job, and it works. And if it works 80, 90% of the time, people are like, oh, well, that's okay. And that is a risk in the security industry because you need it working 100%
and funnily
of the time,
enough, radar's a good one to pick up on in a sense, because it's like talking about all the other detection systems and making sure they're being used, but then also you flip it on its head a little bit and go, radar with a PTZ for remote monitoring, hard work.
Yeah.
That is hard work, because the events coming from the radar unit, unless they've put an IO module on it, so you can get the events to come from the PTZ, but you have to use other bits of kit, and it's a PTZ. So PTZ, by the time it triggers through to the arc, we've had them where they've triggered through, and it's in motion. So the first event that you get, it's on the spin.
Moving.
So actually,
You don't even know what it's.
you almost by saying that we need to educate on monitoring, you almost end back at square one of actually what you want is a bullet camera looking straight in front, triggering. I think I just get on my high horse about it, because I just think I can spot the difference by a mile of when someone's truly looking at offering that person the best security solution versus someone that just went, these 4 cameras will do the job, and sell it.
Couple of things I want to touch on. Has there been much of a change with when we moved from telecoms, from your ISDN lines, your PSTN, and we moved up to now, IP and stuff? Has that made it a lot easier, or is it just the natural progression? Is just you would have been on the actual.
So I think when we look back, I think there was a lot of challenges with the PSTN.
The refresh rate, how it's coming through,
Yeah.
modems, all that stuff.
But even the install, having a box right next to the panel, and the monitoring, and the installer would then have to communicate that to the customer. The customer had to reach out to BT OpenReach or somebody. Then they had to get that installed, and then you had to return. It was a big headache.
Change in the
dedicated
system.
lines and things like that, and so in that sense, it's better. But then there's sort of new challenges, I suppose. There's new, lockdown.
Networks, IT people.
Exactly.
They don't
so
want
we're using
firewalls,
And then we're becoming heavily
So the
reliant
next-
on GSM as well.
Yeah.
Because then what you'll get is a lot will go, well, I can't get the LAN port, so I'll just go GSM.
stick
Yeah.
to
So the
4G,
fact that
5G
dual
and-
path, GSM is dual path, and there's a debate there. because as long as the SIMs are actually steered to two different
networks.
Yep.
And I'm not going to name names, but
Yeah.
So yeah, this challenge. I think you've nailed it. That's
Yeah,
exactly it. It's like, yes, it was
certain-
more painful for the
There was
installer.
challenges there, but the same challenges have
it-
just moved into different.
exactly.
For the ARCs,
Yeah.
it's like if them networks go down, it doesn't really matter if that were a phone
Yeah.
line or a GSM. It goes out en masse at times.
Yeah, but it's a difficult one because, like you say, the installers are going to the sites, and like you say, they can't necessarily get on the network. Okay, well, there's an alternative, so that's great. Radio. But then again, there's then more challenges with, or different challenges with that as well. So it's a balancing act, and it's difficult for an installer to know
What challenges they're going to be facing.
what is going to work the best.
It's really
essentially,
important for the
on
resilience
install.
side. I mean, when I first heard about obviously Redcar and that was going down, I just thought, yes, there's the PSTN challenge and the installers have got that, but I've obviously got my selfish ARC hat on at that moment and thinking, what do we do from the ARC perspective? That was not good news for anybody in the ARC space, because you need the different signalling providers, because you don't want, in every other, again, I refer back to training, you're taught to not have a single point of dependency, and all of a sudden the signalling market becomes
only one.
pretty much one who don't
Yeah.
get me wrong, have done an amazing job to get to
But now
where they are and keeping it.
they're closing. Is it in 2 weeks or so? Redcar.
15th of March.
The Redcar one's
Redcar.
absolute close off here, isn't it? It's like
Yeah.
mid December, but we'll see. I keep thinking, are
They
they
keep
going to
delaying it,
actually
don't
close it
they?
out? But then you saw AdSecure took on that network, and then obviously Permacon's just come to market. You've got your Intruder panels are now doing signalling from Hub. Ajax
Yes.
have just fetched out Ajax
Yeah.
services. You've got.
Yes.
It's great to see, because that's my main thing with signalling is just resilience across the market.
Yeah, and I think like what we're saying about, with all the different arcs, we all sort of push each other, and I suppose it's the same in that side of things as well. The more options an installer's got, the more solutions they've got for certain projects, etc. But also it drives everyone to be a little bit better, doesn't it? And pushes everybody a little bit more. That could be cost, but also reliability and things like that. So
I wondered what you
that's
two
good.
thought about this, actually, because in terms of us three having direct ARC experience, I've obviously technically got the least in terms of years spent in actually working for an ARC.
Yep.
Whether you see it in a good way that ARCs are more supportive of each other now, because from an installer perspective, we used the ARC that we used when I first worked for a company, and then the second company I worked for, we used the ARC we used. That was pretty much it. Didn't have much more involvement than that. I had a good account manager at the second ARC, so I got to know it a little bit more. That's what intrigued me. But these days, I see it and I feel it. There's good support. Like the guys over at Fenix, fantastic. We're really close with the First County guys.
Yeah.
When I saw that Kelly were going over to Fenix, I thought all that experience that she's got from EMCS, and
Yeah, absolutely.
I do see that. And we go to TSE and we're all talking, because we all know our professional boundaries. But
Yeah.
well, you said earlier, how do we crack the nut of getting monitoring across to the industry? Well, to some degree, we've got to be united on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, like you say, on the installers that are not using monitoring at all. That's down to all of us to sort of, encourage that and educate and
I think it's probably there. It's interesting. If you look at sort of the two markets I would mainly be involved with, so you've got Ireland and then you've got over here. And I think over here actually there's more collegiality, if that's the word, and part of that is a geographical thing as well, right? Because you're not necessarily sitting in on each other's customers. It's a big market, and there's an availability there, and it definitely does improve the overall service as a whole if you can work together a lot of the time, because that one, it does drive people, but actually we've got these problems in the industry. We need to, we go back to false activation management. Nobody really sits down and goes, you will be isolated if you do this, right? Like, it's in the terms and conditions, right? Like, it's there, but actually nobody really wants to go, because everybody's kind of sitting there going, are you 4 activations an hour? Are you 3 activations? So that little kind of movement.
Yeah.
But actually, the more that comes standard, the more it actually allows installers understand and removes the grey that you were talking about earlier on.
Yep.
And it kind of goes, this is what it is. This is the base acceptability of what you're going to go with. And it's funny, it's definitely, here I would see it there, but I think, we were talking about this the other day, it would be really nice to see a monitoring forum, if you want to put it that. Sentinel do it. Like they pull people together.
There's an ARC section with BSIA.
Yeah.
So in the BSIA, there's an ARC section there, and they'll raise topics about standards, regulations, new tech. So it is. That's what I mean. I guess that's why I was saying it. I've been at DSOC coming up 6 years, and I've seen it.
Yeah.
I can see the slight change, and I think it's because we were so conscious about the resilience things around the single dependency on alarm signalling. So everybody circled around each other to go, "What are you going to do? What's happening? Have you heard anything?"
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing. And I think, but if we can do that in the organisations, because I've seen that in other sectors that we work in, the more the suppliers all come together on the topics that we know we can speak about. We're all professionals. We know what we're going to talk about. We're not going to sit down and have a powwow about our customers' accounts.
Yeah.
We're going to sit down and go, have you faced this problem?
Yeah.
We have. What are you doing about it? What should we all do?
And I think it does give that sort of, and that where I was talking about that forum is actually less in the sort of in the closed space, if you want to put it in, but more in the open space of actually installers coming in and being able to have a conversation with a group of ARCs, and also ARCs being able to go and have, have key conversations about this topic. Here are the experts on
I don't know
X,
if
Y,
there'd be any
Z.
scrapping though.
Well, that could be interesting too.
I think what you could do for that at the minute is just pick your aisle at TSE. go down an aisle at TSE and talk to all of us.
Could be fun.
There's one misconception that police response and URNs, and I see different topics across some brands as well, where they will say, alarm activated, we can see there's an intruder on site, we'll call the police. Okay. And that's on a domestic property. But then I'm thinking, has that property actually got a URN? And then you got on commercial sites where the installer has gone to the police force and got a URN, and that ties everything up. But what is the difference with someone monitoring a site, seeing an intruder's come on, picking the phone up and saying, there's an intruder at this business centre, can you attend? Compared to someone going down that whole process of actually getting a URN and then the ARC ringing up the police and saying, right, we've got an incident taking place here. What's the actual difference?
I think the message to those that wouldn't understand it and getting in the kind of granular bits of it is the URN being in place, the ARC holding the accreditation they hold, and that URN being in place is giving that police station is aware, so they're receiving a call from a valid ARC who is registered with them about a site that is registered with them. So therefore, it's much more likely that that's going to be something we should bother attending. That's the message. That's the easy message to digest. You can start picking it apart and go, which ARC would escalate police on video, which ARC would escalate police on non-URN sites, and you can have that debate.
It raises that question, doesn't it?
It takes that doubt, yeah.
I think another difference as well is we have an issue where somebody enters a secured area. Where does it class as a civil issue, and where will the police actually respond? So without a URN, you have an issue where you sort of need to visually see some sort of criminal activity.
Okay.
Whereas with a URN, essentially, if they're climbing a fence, they shouldn't be there, and that's where the URN can be utilised and dispatched, hopefully before any criminal damage or activity is. So that's a big difference as well. So it's sort of you can sort of get the response a little bit quicker because just as they enter the property.
Yeah, it validates it to the police force.
It's more of a validation.
Yeah.
But
you think of that person running that police control room who's taking them calls, them call handlers, they've got to manage that situation.
Yeah.
They've got inbound like the ARC's got inbound.
Well,
and you think of it almost like a prioritisation, but not prioritisation because it goes to top of call queue, just a prioritisation because on their inbound software, they're going to be aware that that's a registered ARC.
They know they have
on
a
registered
responsibility
site
to
with
attend.
a URN.
Yeah.
So already that human who picked that phone up is going, this is likely one that needs to be
And what
attended.
we're looking at police response times now at the moment.
Oh, we see a right mixed bag. I'll be honest with
Is
you.
that
we
is
see
that
a mixed
dependent on
bag.
forces throughout the
It just
country?
depends
It is, yeah.
on
Your bigger, it's the
agencies,
obvious
yeah.
stuff you'd have with anything. The bigger cities are obviously busier with other things that would be
We-
higher on the priority.
Yeah, I
You-
think
you're
the
just
ru- the
outside
rule
the
of-
big city.
I think it's like 20 minutes is sort of like
Is that standard?
standard.
Yeah,
That's what
I'd
the
go with
police
that.
will ask. If you have a URN, the police will ask that a key holder responds within 20 minutes to assist the police if needed while they're on site. So that's the window.
Yeah.
but yeah, we obviously see.
What's the quickest ever response you've seen of a
Oh, we've
police?
seen like just
good couple of minutes.
yeah, same.
Yeah.
Really lucky situations where they've been
Where
close
they've been
by.
Just nearby.
by.
Yeah, this is it. Just nearby.
Literally, I'm talking within 2 minutes.
But
Yeah.
you've also got to remember, right? Police, they've become the police because they want to catch people, right?
I always say that. We always hit off on that.
Yeah, like
Our
that's-
MD's ex-police, and it's the biggest learning piece for us as a business it's to make sure all of us understand it, because I've grown up with if it's not got a URN, it's not getting a response. And then you've got Rob on our side's like, what are you on about? When I were a bobby, if someone's breaking into a site and we've got
We're
a call
going
from control
regardless.
room, what, someone's seen someone breaking into site? Yeah,
Yeah.
right, I'm setting off. I want to put cuffs on them. That's why you're in the job.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it does come down, but the other side of that, which I think is important, is that 20 minutes is the top side, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're also looking at it going, and I think that's where, if you look at Intruder versus CCTV, and you look at CCTV and intervention, that's where that's so crucial, right? Is actually what you're trying to do with CCTV monitoring is cut that down so as you intervene straight away. And that's a really quick intervention.
Yeah.
So that person who comes on goes, first of all, that window of opportunity is closed down. But I know these people are on it. I know it's a quick response. So, and this is antisocial is probably the way to put it. I don't know the right way. Like, effectively what you want to do from an end user's point of view is you want to say, my site is the one that you're most likely to get caught on. So don't hassle me. Go down the street to the guy who doesn't have that.
We hear that all the time.
You know, and like that's what you're looking at. So it's kind of interesting. Is your URNs are important, right? And but if you're relying on police response, you've got a good timeline before the damage. You know, before they stop the damage.
Agreed.
Was really what you're looking at is that quick audio response, and I think that's where the industry's changing and can change more. Is what other responses? How does that look?
Agreed.
What does
Over
that come
deterrence,
from, and
yeah.
how does it go? And I think that's
I think
part of it.
the audible is the strongest, from experience, and a live bespoke shout out rather than a pre-recorded.
Pre-recorded,
as
yeah.
well.
They know
It's
someone's
so
watching.
much
It's a
more,
different
you can be
conception,
specific.
isn't it?
Can give them an oi.
Yeah.
Oi. Get gone.
But yeah, they sort of know, like you say, that somebody's watching.
you're
them.
totally
Rather-
right.
They know the difference
That's
between
when you'll
a
see them on
pre-recorded
camera and
message
you'll see them go like that. Rather
Yeah.
than like if
Yeah,
it's
they're
just
looking
some,
round, they
if it's
wanna see.
recorded, you can see them just carrying on with what they're doing.
But you know what's interesting as well, right? We all agree, right? Audio is key. But then you also turn around and you go, how many times has an audio been issued and somebody on premises has turned off the amp because of whatever reason, or turned it down, or moved it around? So like you go back to your education and you're like, this is the key, and like doing audio tests and doing stuff like that. Because
I've experienced that issue exactly. It's like in a domesticated area, and they had, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, and the sound was that bad that they had to lower it down. They had that many complaints, that they were forced to lower it down to a point where, I don't know how,
But it's like.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like,
like I say,
Could you possibly?
Someone whisper it.
But like you say, you see it there again, a challenge there for the installer and also for the ARC, and the value of the audible challenge is a lot less then, isn't it?
I think that's somewhere where it's getting interesting in the industry, because now you look at AI and where that's coming from, and with voice AI and where that's coming from, and you're starting to see where there's the automated but specific audio.
Yep.
And that's quite interesting, right?
Yep.
Because I think from an ARC perspective, now you're so we all would have said exactly, like, I'm 100% with you.
Yep.
Like a voice recorded audio, it's worth something.
Yeah, it is.
So long as it's followed up with a live one. But if it's just recorded, I remember walking by a house, and I walked by, I had the dog with me, I walked by, I got audio. I walked back again, I got audio.
Yeah.
Straight away you go, well, clearly no one's monitoring this, right? Like, it's
Well,
just
that's the first thing in your mind, isn't it? It's
yeah.
like nobody's actually watching this.
No.
It's just triggering. It's automatic.
But I know where
It's-
you're going. You're going towards. You're going. AI is actually doing a scene read, and then audibly describing
But
what's going on.
I think that's going to get really interesting, because then you've got, where do you take the service of monitoring versus the automation of technology?
It's very interesting you said that, because a couple of days ago we were filming one with I don't know if it's called Jason from Device Smart. They do the flashing blue light. It's called a Night Saber.
Yeah.
And he said, why don't we get AI to now with the camera to see that you're wearing a black t-shirt, black trousers. So the audible alert that comes out and goes, "Oi, you there with the black t-shirt and the black trousers, move away from it."
Yeah.
So AI working a bit more smarter.
It's possible now.
We've
had it pitched to us twice now.
We had Alarm. Paul Andrews from Johnson Controls. He goes, Alarm.com cameras can already do that. They can already see what you're doing and direct it in that way.
Yeah.
We're weighing it up at the minute between. We've had a couple of them type solutions put to us for kind of AI automation on your own calls, which we don't feel is us, and that's what you got to weigh up as a business ultimately.
Yeah.
Of how are you going to use this in your business efficiently, operationally, but also does it go against what you're about? But as a security measure, again, it's another layer to consider. Why not? I mean, if that's a vast site and you know you're going to get high activity on camera detection, and you feel that a human doing that regularly through the night doesn't make sense, and that end user wants to make sure them audio messages are delivered, absolute no excuses, regardless of how busy the arc is. I could understand putting an AI layer on that. That would make sense to me.
And it's I think what's going to be interesting is you, like, effectively, if you go back to the efficiency thing that we talked about at the start, you're looking at it going, that efficiency, if you fix that efficiency, that sort of the independent, self-monitored with AI voice versus a good service that actually you're sitting there going 95% or even 50% of our activations are genuine, pure interactions. That gets really interesting. But I think if we don't address that problem, right, if we don't go and say, we've got to be more efficient, we've got to make sure we don't have the false activations, we've got to make sure, then all of a sudden the self-monitored system, what's not as efficient, the service level is starting to the balance between the two, the risk of the high queues and the slow response versus the automation and the I can see my cameras and actually I can. That's where the world is going to come. And I think that's definitely the next, I think over the next couple of years, that's going to be really interesting, because I think you're going to see ARCs who are really spending a lot of time making sure that any activation that comes in is a person, and is a person that shouldn't be there, right? And like if the ARC gets that level, two things happen. One is the costs dramatically reduce, which means that cost will reduce, which means it's more ubiquitous and you can use it in a better way. But also it means you can now provide a service that's a higher level than what is automated and coming back down on the other side.
That's exactly my point. Yeah, that's the debate. That's a wider debate with AI, though, isn't it? As well, not just in our industry.
It will be like you say. I think it will come down to who's utilising it in the most effective way, as an addition or as a support. In
100%.
We see it with like you say with the AI, and you mentioned before about sticking AI on it and saying do your thing and hoping that the AI is going to just fix all the problems. But there's a huge element of, like you say, the false alarm management and the learning of the AIs and constantly trying to teach it, certain things to look out for and change.
It's not there yet, is it?
Exactly.
That's why I like we get asked.
model.
Because we do loads of work in self-storage. I don't know if anyone's heard.
May have noticed.
in that, again, there's a lot of educational pieces, and I always, when they ask us about AI, you guys do AI, and I'm always like, it's video analytics and it's machine learning, and it's a little bit more of an exact science than the AI that's getting done in all other walks of life at the minute. So a lot of the other AI is, it's come to market now and it needs all its data. These video analytics have had this for absolutely ages. I was installing them years ago, decade plus, ages ago. So it's had a lot of these object classifications. A video saying it's a person, it's had so many millions and billions worth of proof that it is. You've got to keep to that machine learning, and that's what I think we look at that as a business and we go, you don't get taken a fancy by it being AI. You think of it from a machine learning perspective and think, well, can that help us and our people? Yeah. And if that helps us deliver a good service, well, then we'll sign up to that AI thing, but only if it makes sense.
Yeah, but ultimately, like you say, it relies on you, that's managing it.
At the end of the day.
Yeah.
There's a brand, which I know we're all aware of, who are in the market, who have their own monitoring station, they have their own salespeople, and they have their own installers as well. But the level of installations which you can see all over social media is literally, let's say indoors, they'll plug the camera in and stick it onto the wall. However, a lot of consumers are sold into that. You know, they'll sign up to 2-3 year contracts and they think our property, we've got, you know, we're covered by such and such a brand, and they'll send a guard out if something happens. How do you try and educate the consumer that that model is completely different to this model over here?
Maybe we all need like radio adverts and TV adverts to help.
I think that kind of, we were chatting about it earlier on, right? Like, I think if you're an independent installer, like if you're going and doing the installation, it's actually really interesting because you're saying, look, I've chosen this control room, I've chosen this arc because they are the best at doing this. Yeah. And vice versa, the arc is also turning around and going, and we're checking that the independent installer's work is up to scratch because it's coming into us, and if it's not well installed, it's going to create false activation, and we're going to be onto them. So it's funny because the power of marketing, right, is very strong. That's why we're all here as well, right? So it's there. But if you look at it, you kind of go, actually, when you go and talk to an end user, right, and that's probably, there's a gap of do you get the opportunity to talk to that end user? But if you get to talk to that end user, you go, so do you really want the person who put it in, the person who sold it to you,
is the same person normally the person who puts it in as well.
Right, about 2 days training, maybe.
And then they put it in. So nobody's checking that they spec'd it right. The person who sold it, nobody's checking that they spec'd it right. They put it in, and then the same company then goes, oh yeah, we're going to monitor it, and we're going to make sure that he's done a good job as well at the same time. Oh, and by the way, this person who put the install in, they're never going to turn around and go, oh, the monitoring was a mistake, and actually the ARC has made a mistake. So you kind of look at it and you go, it's almost perversely wrong in many ways, but it's an easy sell.
Yeah, and it's also wrong on sense of everything else we spoke about in some ways, because the police response question and the response element, the adverts that I'm joking about, we've all heard them and seen them. They say it. Yeah. They say like, oh, intruder seen, police have been called. Have they? Yeah. Is that really, have they?
I suppose that's how they use the video.
Yeah, and it's powerful.
Yeah.
Super powerful. But I think we've just got to work. It's not against that one outfit. There's other outfits out there that are doing it. It's you've hit the right tone. It's ARCs pushing their own message out of what professional monitoring is, and installers pushing their message out of what professional installation is. Yeah. And accreditations matter.
Yeah, and who's watching who? You know, I think that's a really...
Yeah, I think we're all within the industry, I suppose, singing from the same hymn sheet. I think it's education, and I suppose the end customer, there's going to be somebody that's looking for something like this, and they don't necessarily need all the
they more regulations.
Yeah, they more
like
need
it
for
the easy fix, don't they?
Yeah, and this is what and I think, like I say, it's education. It's difficult because we're relying on you being able to sit in front of someone. You mentioned earlier, it's very difficult to actually spend the time and go through all of the these are the differences, and because customers don't necessarily want to hear it.
They normally see what they see on social media,
and again, that's so powerful that
I don't know if I'm right with it, but domestically, I don't have as much problem with it because you've got every right to buy wherever you want to buy. I think when it gets in on certain commercial
you see it on commercial,
I've got a problem with that because I just think, well, what's the insurer doing?
I was about to say,
has that actually been audited?
And it's all okay until something goes wrong. That's probably the biggest issue, right?
The biggest issue.
You turn around and you go, oh yeah, we just had a break in, and the insurance company goes, cool, okay, can you tell me about your alarm? And straight away, if it's like, even in residential, if you are taking your discounts because you've got a monitored alarm, if your alarm isn't on, your insurance can be voided. Whether you're in the property, whether you're not in the property, it doesn't matter. So it's one of those things where you go, like on commercial, it's such a risk for such a little gain. You know what I mean? That you go on, and as I said, it's all okay until
it goes wrong.
Yeah, well, we've probably all heard the horror stories as well, and there's one that always springs to mind with me is taking out, I think it was 64 sort of hard wired cables and just snipping them, and replacing with like, you know, a couple of sort of PIRs. That area will cover that. That will cover that. And again, it's
Somewhere like an intruder alarm engineer died when you just.
absolutely. And it did me. I'm not even from the engineering sort of background, but even for me, it was like, oh God, you know, I can't actually believe that, you know,
But
what you're telling me.
I know what went to the other products. I think it's not
scary.
fair, but a bit of me does think fair play to them in another sense, because I do think
The business
a
model.
lot of installers could put other product in that, and that installer isn't necessarily accredited, but they're putting that product in. And what training have they?
I get it, and
really had?
everybody's got that, you know, opportunity, I suppose, at the same market. But I think, like you say, ethically, it's not necessarily, you know.
It's
challenge you've got to, like,
if
address.
you're just going to an address and saying you just want that cell and you're snipping 63, you know, and sticking. I think that's where the issues lie. That's the issue. I think that's where the industry are against that. You know, and again, you're a salesman that's going out in, you know, not all necessarily like you with that experience. They're just, you know, oh, I've got a cell. Yeah, well, I'll stick it up for you, and you're not necessarily thinking about the end customer that you're selling it to.
I think that's also where, and it's coming from the Irish market. It's interesting, right? Because you've got full legislation, right? It is illegal unless you are fully licensed to do that install.
Yep.
You know, if you are not a monitored ARC, you can't, or if you're not a certified ARC, if you're not part of the PSA, you cannot monitor somebody's system.
So when you guys sort of like moved into the UK market, you must have thought, we jumped into the Wild West here.
Oh, man,
There's gardeners going out installing security systems. We're getting locked up in Ireland.
It was Wild West, like it was properly wild, because we were sitting here going, so what you're telling me is I could set up a security company and I could go and start installing systems, because anybody who knows me, I cannot do that, right? I've got two left hands and no chance of being any good at any of it. So like, you're kind of looking at it going, there's no hope, right? But there's nothing stopping me doing it. And that's the thing that, like, it was really interesting. Like, I was just going,
You couldn't comprehend it.
Not genuinely, I was like, this is the wildest thing. And also because, you know, in Ireland, we're known for being very good at having rules and then kind of having ways of getting around those rules, but they don't, you know. So I was kind of going, like, when you come over here, I was kind of going, the rules are going to be the rules, right? Like, it's going to be, like, locked down, you know? And, you know, like, you got your BS standards and that's what it is, and there you go. And all of a sudden you're like, this is really odd. And I like, it is, and it's something that I think if you look across the industry as a whole, it would be a brilliant thing to get more licensing in, because that will clean up a lot of stuff.
And I think definitely. Just to add to that, we've been through that same journey in a sense, because we looked at the Irish market. We've just got the PSA licensing at DSOC because we were looking at that market and learning about it and realising, well, we can't even start to look at business in there till we're PSA licensed. It's a real job. You're getting audited, or you've got to license all your staff. But what we have learned in that process is it's no more arduous than the NSI audit we already have. It's very similar. Yeah. So what that should reassure everybody about is that, well, the NSI is holding the ARCs to much the same standard. There's no actual standard differences. It's just not illegal to not be it.
Yeah, like in Ireland.
Yeah.
You can get fined if you, even as a client, if you get a non-licensed person to come and install, both of you can get fined. Which we don't have that here in the UK.
That's exactly the difference. I bet we've got the standards. The standards are there, and if you're the right business,
just need to go into law and get it.
The difference is it's law. Like that is the big difference. And what it does do as well is it means that, say, the PSA, they can run advertisements saying, you need to use a licensed installer. You need to use a licensed ARC, because if you don't, you are subject to these fines. And again, we go back to what we were just talking about earlier on, where you're going, the risk-reward ratio, right? Like the insurance. All of a sudden, people are just going, oh, like, okay, it's going to maybe it costs me a little bit more, you know, maybe it costs me 100 quid more, whatever. But they're going, I am not risking that money for a $3,000 fine or a $4,000 fine.
It's the consumer as well that's responsible as well,
isn't
it? So
it's
I think that's even more important, because the consumer's actually looking to, you know, right, I need to use these companies. Whereas, like you say, over here, it's just a case of like, what's cheapest, what's quickest, and great, you know, satisfy whatever need that they need.
Yeah, I think
if that satisfies it, then they're happy.
Well, I was saying earlier about we've kept saying education, haven't we? And I was saying earlier when I ran about understanding different aspects of business, and when I've gone on my own kind of trying to find the right course. Part of that was on the legal side of it within one of the courses that I'm doing another finance one. And part of that was I learned and clicked, I'll talk to the insurers. So like I talk to as many insurers as I get a chance to. Every opportunity I get to talk to insurers, especially in sectors that we're strong in, I talk to them. And it's not a case of I'm like smacking them over the head and saying you've got to change this, you must do that. But if you can get that into them, that the underwriters, and then you can get the policies out there, and then they are being held to it because it's been stipulated by insurance.
I think historically that's what used to happen. I think, like you say, signalling providers used to actually go and visit installers and educate them, and they were, I think even now they're probably reading from them same scripts. You know, we get it all the time that, you know, oh, I need this. Same on tenders, isn't it? This certain grade 4.
Tenders love it.
I need this grade 4. Digital. I need this grade 4 system. Yeah. Actually, you know, it's not actually grade 4 now. It's, you know, your DPs, and then they're relaying that back to the installer, and the installer's coming back and insisting that it needs to be this, and because they're reading from this, like you say, historic script. And
so that's the work we can do. The work we can do is with consultants and insurers, because it gets into policies and it gets into contracts.
But the flip side of that, and having talked to insurers, right, the interesting side is, as we said, with Intruder, it's pretty standardized, right? The technology is pretty standardized. It's pretty. Whilst you can have you can have 2 monitored CCTV systems, 2 industrial warehouses side by side. Yep. One is put in bad detection, is monitored by a control room that doesn't have processes, that doesn't do anything, that can take 20 minutes to respond, and you have one which is put in the right one. And the insurance company
don't know the difference.
They do not know how to measure those. Yeah. And I think it's funny that risk is really interesting. Like, and I was dealing with my own place when I was getting monitored or getting insured, and they went, well, you have monitoring. I said, yeah, and I have CCTV monitoring, and they were really confused. So it's kind of interesting. It's that understanding of from an insurance point of view, I fully get where they kind of go, okay, yeah, I insist on having CCTV monitoring, but I'm not going to give you any discount because I don't know if it's any good or not, but it's going to slightly mitigate my risk, right?
And you're not going to win it all with that. Like, there's some I've spoke to and it's not changed how they put their things together at all, but there's also some I've spoke to where they've changed what their minimum guidance would be. So if their staff are out there giving talks or their underwriters, it just clicks with them, then it starts to affect a little bit of change. Yeah. It's not an instant fix, but it pushes the needle a bit.
The more the better.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you, because it's been an absolutely brilliant episode, this. And hopefully in the future, probably get you on again.
I think probably talk too much.
Thank you.
You got 25 questions to go.
We've not even done half.
That brings us to the end of today's discussion on remote monitoring. A massive thank you to Dan Murphy from Fenix Monitoring, and Hebblethwaite from DSOC, and Emmet Hogan from Inniovate for sharing genuine insight into how modern monitoring sensors actually operate. This is what Room Secured is all about. Real conversations with the people who sit at the heart of the security chain. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe and stay tuned. More conversations coming soon.